I don't really know how to open this video.
Stay on.
I started this project months ago, and, well, it feels like we're living through our own Avengers Endgame right about now. Maybe that's the reason why I need to do this video. When I think of this movie, I think about the power of community. How the strongest bonds are built from the toughest times. Yes, it's filled with tragedy and despair, but it's also filled with optimism and love, and it shows how these forces are often inseparable. Marvel movies have been viewed as comfort food. They're these fun things that can help us through tough times. While I think this is true, I also think that in these stories are the tools to navigate our own lives. The tools to make our worlds just as exciting as theirs. This is the final installment of the Marvel Studios Retrospective, and Endgame is a special movie to end this series on. Because not only is it a phenomenal Marvel movie, but it's also the story about why we fell in love with this series in the first place. Avengers Endgame is many things. A celebration of 11 years of Marvel blockbusters, the last hurrah of Phase 1's core iconic characters, but first and foremost, it's a story about a group of people reconciling with their tragic past. A story about saving the day after the end of the world. Of course, one can't discuss Endgame without first talking about Infinity War, the older sibling that is both its own standalone story, yet when combined with Endgame creates a beautiful 5.5-hour epic. Infinity War was the main event, the self-proclaimed biggest crossover in film history. It's a film where all the characters you know and love come together to fight the big purple dude Marvel's been building up to for over half a decade. It's the ultimate test for the Avengers Initiative. With the plot in motion well before the film begins, time is of the essence as characters form unexpected alliances and spring into action. In 2018, I did a video on Infinity War's action storytelling, and how important it was for the characters to define themselves within their action scenes. This characterization through action was so important because outside of these action scenes, most of these characters had little to no screen time. Infinity War is a film about action, or more specifically, reacting to a galactic threat. They do the typical assembling to protect the world, but this time, they couldn't prepare for what they were up against. The ultimate magic trick Infinity War pulled off is that it united all of Marvel's heroes, only to center the film around its villain. Infinity War is Thanos' movie. It goes deep inside his mind and philosophy, and humanizes him through his relationship with Gamora. Narratively, the film structures itself around Thanos' struggles, giving him the end of Act 2 low point and the twist in the third act. Marvel heroes typically fight through countless cannon fodder in their own movies, but now, they're the cannon fodder in Thanos' movie. The point of making the film about Thanos is to show the Avengers how much Thanos is better than them. Cool superpowers and the bonds of friendship can't stop Thanos' unbreakable morals and unmatched cruelty. 18 films of growth and development just aren't enough for the Mad Titan. Thanos becomes the ultimate force of regression for the Avengers. Because of his godlike status granted to him by the stones, Thanos robs the Avengers of potential moments of development and defiance. The best example of this is Star-Lord's temper tantrum that costs the Avengers the fight on Titan. Any catharsis he may have had with losing Gamora is taken away from him, which leads him to being emotionally unprepared to finally confront Thanos. This is my favorite scene in the film, how Thanos maintains control without ever having to lift a finger. Speaking of lifting fingers, what makes Thanos' final act so powerful is how it undoes all the progress the MCU has made up until this point. If we view the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a series about friendships that make the world better, the snap is a tragedy that traumatizes the world by taking away those friendships. Even though this act of genocide is meant to be dispassionate and random, the writers took creative liberties in killing all of the newer characters, while the older ones watched their successors turn to dust. It is among the most traumatizing things to occur in a mainstream movie. Children cried at one of my screenings. It was great. So many blockbusters. Marvel films included, will hang galactic-sized threats over the audience that failed to engage them on an emotional level. Just think back to the destruction of Hosnian Prime in The Force Awakens. Did you feel any sadness over the deaths of billions of people? What separates Infinity War is how it keeps things personal. We don't see the galactic-sized ramifications around this moment, only the horror that the characters we care about go through. This isn't about the end of the world, this is about the end of their world. All meaningful relationships, all potential new franchises, gone. However, not all hope is drained from our heroes, as they see a chance to undo their recent failure. Which leads us here. The Avengers assemble. They do their thing, and it just doesn't work. Our heroes beat the villain into submission and kill him because they've failed. There's nothing to outpunch, no plan to outwit. It's over. Avengers Endgame begins with the end of the MCU. What is the purpose of a finale? What should the third installment of a trilogy, a series finale, or the climax of a cinematic universe do besides finish a story? I looked through as many finales as I could, and the best answer I could come up with is, a great finale should provide the hardest challenge to a series' values and ultimately change or come to a conclusion on its underlying premise. Let's take a look at one of the best shows and finales out there. Breaking Bad tells the story of Walter White, an overqualified chemistry teacher who undergoes a transformation into a meth kingpin following a terminal cancer diagnosis. For 5 electric seasons, the narrative threads between 2 central points of tension: whether the dangers of his job will collide with his family, and just how far Walt will break bad. Season 5's iconic Ozymandias offers the answers to these show-long questions. Yes, and pretty far. Ozymandias is the episode where Walt's lies come crashing down. The episode begins with his DEA brother-in-law being murdered and most of his money being taken from him, and then it follows Walt as his family turns on him and he becomes a wanted criminal. All of his efforts were for nothing, as he's forced to abandon his family and go into hiding. Narratively, this is the climax of the show. This could have been a satisfying final episode and provided a necessary cautionary tale on the dangers of ego. I bring Ozymandias up because I feel it has a lot in common thematically with Infinity War. Both begin with acts of murder that send our protagonists into action, and both follow their protagonists as they fight to preserve the status quo of their series, only for their efforts to be too late. Our characters become powerless and can only react to the end of the world. However, in both cases, this is not the end of their story, as they both leave one final episode to try to make things right. The parallels between Breaking Bad's Felina and Avengers Endgame are staggering. Both begin with large time jumps after the destruction of their worlds, following their characters as they return to their former identities. While both narratives have external villains, the real fights these characters have are internal, as in order to make things right, they have to first identify why they went wrong in the first place.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it.
This is where the change part comes in, as the characters have to adapt their central mission in order to finish it. Walt can't provide for his family and make things right without first confronting that he was providing for his ego all along. Once he admits this, he can finally help his family through Elliot and Gretchen, the people he should have turned to in the first place. He serves his ego by killing the man who murdered Hank, but also inadvertently saves his former partner's life in the process. His old destructive behavior is now a force for good. It's the change in the show's mission that truly makes the finale to Breaking Bad so satisfying. So now we turn to Endgame. How does this film change the mission of the Avengers? Well, it's in the title.
Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
There was an idea to bring together a group of remarkable people to see if they can become something more. This is the core of the Avengers. Yes, there's a fight the battles we never could part, but the character transformation through interaction is what drives these films. For each character's solo film, we establish the core flaws they'll have to wrestle with over the course of their series. Then in the team-up films, we see how these strengths and weaknesses pair off of other characters we care equally about. Regardless of popularity or box office success, each character is asked to give up their individual needs and become a part of something bigger. There is a constant tension between the individual and the group. Strong personalities create strong disagreements, and not everyone's strengths and weaknesses will gel. In order for all these characters to work together, all of them have to go through a core transformation, losing a part of their identity but gaining a strength in their new role. These are films of both the world's largest stars, both in their universe and ours, learning to share the spotlight. Not every conflict resolves this neatly, but when it does, we see how sharing the hero gig makes the Avengers better people. They open themselves up to new relationships and experiences. The traumatic losses from their past become mended by this new family, one that argues and expands, but is united by a common goal. But then, this happens. They found a battle they couldn't fight, and those core bonds built for the universal conflict are fundamentally ripped to shreds. The bonds of the Avengers were there to mend their tragic pasts, but now, the Avengers itself is a new tragic past to inform their darker journeys. This is what makes Thanos the ultimate villain. Why grow and open yourself up when it can all be taken from you in an instant? Loss and failure isn't just a risk, it's inevitable. And so, most of the remaining characters regress to adapt to this failure. Some find productive transformation, but only for the sake of healing, not for future action. But they're all still Avengers. They still have that hero bug, as even though those bonds are no longer, the memories on their end live on.
I used to have nothing. And then I got this. This family. I was better because of it. And even though they're gone, I'm still trying to be better.
Enter
Time travel!
Now on the surface, time travel is a bit of a cop-out to resolve this conflict, though it is given weight by the 5-year gap that ensures the overall loss sinks in. But if all these characters did was go back in time and collected a couple of rocks to fix everything, this would be a criminally unsatisfying story. As we've learned all too well, narratives that only focus on convoluted plot mechanics seldom work out. No, the reason why the time travel narrative works is because all these characters are haunted by their past, and so this mechanic creates the opportunity to not only undo their mistakes, but also the chance to rediscover and redefine their heroic spirit. Each stone-based mission is a cover for the filmmakers to explore each character's past. All of them have lost or are in need of something, and this trip down memory lane is their way of finally becoming whole. There isn't a threat they're reacting against, and so every change they make is entirely on their terms. This initiation becomes harder for some characters as the team versus individual conflict remains. Tony Stark is the Avenger most crucial for this mission to work, and also the character with the most to lose, as he's replaced the loss of his surrogate family with a real one. But still, the ghosts of the past prevail, as the first act spends most of its time convincing these characters to overcome their demons once and for all. So that's the foundation of this conflict, traveling back into these characters' past to rediscover their identity. At the same time, the film is also traveling back into the MCU's past to celebrate this 22-film journey. Now, some of these references are there to please the audience and nothing more. But for the most part, every single callback becomes a moment for these characters to reflect on the larger story of the MCU. This is a crucial element to making a great finale, revisiting core characters and objects and injecting them with a last-minute dose of meaning. I want to highlight two objects that go through core transformations in Avengers Endgame: Mjolnir and Cap's shield. Both of these weapons are the defining symbols for these characters, forged by crucial relationships in their youth. On top of being their signature powers, these weapons are also symbolic of this core relationship, a constant reminder of where their stories began. In each of their third films, these weapons are taken away from them, signaling a rift in the relationships these symbols defined. At the core, this is a negative transformation. The bonds that built this series fall apart, and neither character truly recovers before the test that is Infinity War. And so, in order to make things right, they have to travel back into their past, with these special objects making their way back to them on this journey. For Steve, this reunion cements the forgiveness between him and Tony, setting the tone of making amends and cooperation that the rest of the film builds on. For Thor, well, his transformation is both the most hilarious and the most depressing. The character destined for greatness now soaks in his own misery. He goes from thinking he's owed everything to thinking he is worth nothing, and this transformation is directly tied to the losses he's endured and his failure to prevent them.
Well, if I'm wrong, then what more could I lose?
The key for these journeys is reaffirmation, with Thor finding counsel and closure from his hardest loss. Through his mother, Thor finds peace with where he comes from, and more importantly, where he is now. Only then does Mjolnir come back to him, with Thor for the first time being surprised by its return.
I'm still worthy.
And that's the core for all of these journeys. Each character gets reintroduced with something or someone they've lost, realizing that bond and growth has always been there. These bonds don't just make them stronger, they're the core to their strength in the first place. And now, their strength reaches its final transformation. On top of being a hell of a payoff for Cap, this moment is also built into the meaning embedded into Mjolnir and the Avengers as a whole. For Thor, it's him letting go of his ego and sharing his power. These bonds make our heroes stronger, literally. In this outmatched battle, the hammer calls to the Avengers' aid, turning the tide of the fight. However, the most important part of this moment is that it's not enough. Thanos, the ultimate force of regression, prevails, tossing the hammer aside and hacking at Cap's shield until it splits in half. Now this image is very important. In Age of Ultron, it becomes shorthand for the Avengers' defeat. In a way, you can say it symbolizes half the Avengers dying in the snap. The Avengers transformed, they fought the good fight, and it wasn't enough. Thanos declares checkmate while the Avengers are stuck on the floor. And still, Cap gets up. We see him piece himself back together and return to the fight. It's a microcosm of this film's entire conflict. What's most crucial for this moment is how it organically builds. It takes a while for Cap to get back on his feet, as he feels the weight of the army facing him, earning that final moment of defiance. It is then, and only then, that we finally get this.
Assemble.
Now I could talk for hours about the beauty of this final fight scene, how through the action we see the older characters pass off the baton to the newer ones, how the battle creates the craziest power combinations, or how it sprinkles tiny payoffs for all the characters throughout. But this final battle doesn't succeed because of them. It's not the sweeping team shots that make it soar, but the strong singular moments that anchor them. It's the decision to have Iron Man stand alone against Thanos, countering his inevitability with his defining identity.
And
I am Iron Man.
The truth about Endgame is that it isn't about the Avengers. It's about the individual struggles of a select few characters that make the Avengers. Think back to that iconic assemble moment and how it centers itself around Steve's conviction. The team, the payoffs, they're all framed through the lens of these individuals, and how they transform their stories. I want to go back to that initial Avengers motto. These characters have to change, transform, and risk their lives to fight these battles for us. For these other characters we also care deeply about. It's a hard and punishing gig, one that takes its toll and the lives of many of its core characters. These people can't keep fighting this fight forever, so it offers them something that all other finales must. Closure. Yes, the franchise known for extending and delaying conflicts indefinitely managed to find closure. And it didn't do it through solving all the problems in this vast, expansive universe, but by offering an out to those who created it. Because all along, this was never a story about a vast team or an expanded universe. It was about individual characters. And that's all the great finale can do. Provide a satisfying or meaningful end to the characters we've cared about since the beginning. For Steve, that means getting the life he lost ages ago after restoring the lives of the rest of the galaxy. One of those being Sam Wilson, whom he gifts the Captain America mantle to. After fighting these battles for us, the next step is to prepare the next generation to take over so they can finally rest. The flaws that haunted these characters have been restored, meaning the Avengers Initiative has fulfilled its purpose. But there is one character that doesn't get their happily ever after, and it's the dramatic punch that anchors this film. So I want to end this video on the beautiful tragic arc of Tony Stark. Iron Man is perhaps the most important hero to the Avengers Initiative, as he's its most self-centered and egotistical member. His arc in the first Avengers is overcoming his selfishness, as the Avengers need him more than he needs them. He joins the team, but he does so half-heartedly, disrupting the project while outright rejecting its central mission.
We are not soldiers.
In the end, he rises to the occasion, putting his life and world on the line now that he has new pals to save him when he needs them to. From this point on, his world is forever changed. A lot of Tony's strengths are tied to his selfishness. His independence, inventions, improvisation, all of them are born from his intense self-preservation. The heart of this driving flaw is the tragic death of his parents at a very young age. It forces him to grow up and take command of the family's legacy. All of his fun character quirks take a darker turn in this context, keeping his friends at a distance to not get too emotionally attached. From the beginning, he's been haunted by this loss, only opening out about it after trauma.
I never got to say goodbye to Dad. I never got to say goodbye to my father.
Tony's journey is centered around reacting to and preventing tragedy, putting his friends and the world in increasingly safer suits of armor. This need for preservation is what brings out his lowest moments. This is why Endgame ultimately belongs to Tony. It's the escalation of his constant survivor's guilt.
Watch my friends die. You'd think that'd be as bad as it gets, right? But... nope. Wasn't the worst part.
The worst part is that you didn't.
And of course, on his path to avenge this tragedy, he inevitably crosses paths with his first ghost. Not only is this scene the most important scene in the film, but it's also my favorite. It's the type of scene that time travel narratives are built for, one that almost feels out of place in an Avengers movie. There are no stakes. When Howard enters the scene, Tony has already achieved his Infinity Stone fetch quest. In fact, Tony almost forgets the gem entirely after getting caught up with meeting his dad, which is like a metaphor for this entire film. All that matters in this scene is that they talk. Tony gets that final conversation with his dad. He gets to finally say goodbye. How he finally connects with his dad is his experience as a father. He gives his own dad parenting advice without him knowing it. It's perfect. The ultimate irony of this scene is that Howard didn't succeed. From Tony's perspective, he wasn't the best dad.
He was cold, he was calculating. He never told me he loved me, he never even told me he liked me.
But in this moment, Tony sees him as someone who would do anything for his son. It's in this scene that Tony realizes Howard left him because he was needed elsewhere. Others relied on him more than his own child. And with that, Tony finally finds the value in their limited time together.
No amount of money ever bought a second of time.
And all of this, of course, leads us here. Iron Man has risked his life before. In the first Avengers, he also uses this technology to make the risky play. He has a life to lose, and he has an escape plan, but in this moment, he knows his odds.
Stark, you know that's a one-way trip.
This time, there is no way out. In the best setup and payoff in the saga, this is the one. There is no other way. This is the ultimate personal sacrifice. It's not a twist or a subversion, it even plays the exact same music cue from the first Avengers. It's a decision he's been making repeatedly since the beginning, only this time he finally pays for it. What's different in Endgame is that he's giving up a complete life, abandoning his daughter, which the film took the perfect amount of time to make us care for. This is why the time travel narrative mattered, because Tony got the final reassurance from his dad. If Tony can find closure with Howard, then someday Morgan will find closure with Tony. This entire film is bookended by Tony saying goodbye. In Tony's first scene, he records a farewell with his suit. He sends this message not long after his tragic fight against Thanos, still morally and physically broken by this battle. In his farewell, he is unsure of the rest of the world, or even if Pepper is alive to hear this message. It is raw, pure, and a heartbreaking way to open this story. After his final sacrifice, we hear a similar goodbye, a contingency he records after realizing the weight of his future mission. Despite the state of the world during this recording, he sends it strong, relaxed, at peace with his decision and family, and confident in the world that'll return.
I love you 3,000.
In the next shot, we see the world he saved, the entire Marvel cast saluting their fallen soldier, the team grieving the individual. In one bold statement, the filmmakers declare, this world, these bonds, these stories, they all exist because one man decided to build a heart. And that's a wrap on the Marvel Studios Retrospective. If you're not caught up, here's a playlist to watch it from the beginning. I'll also be revamping my Patreon with a bunch of new stuff, so if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure to support the channel. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.